Good evening. The Church of Scientology is in worldwide damage control tonight after the bombshell speech in federal parliament by Senator Nick Xenophon. Well, now you're about to meet the ordinary Aussies behind those extraordinary claims. Last week they spoke exclusively with Brian Seymour, leaving no stone unturned. And a warning, you could find parts of this story distressing.
I'm a Scientologist.
She's a beaut, eh?
Scientology is not a religious organisation. It is a criminal organisation that hides behind its so-called religious beliefs.
It's incredibly hard to live with. I've lost 2 daughters.
It's said we live in an age of the cult of celebrity. Among religions, Scientology is often referred to as the celebrity cult.
What we are seeing is a worldwide pattern of abuse and criminality.
Oh, God, looking at human beings as assets. Oh, it's hard to comprehend how you can do that.
These are the brave souls who wrote to Nick Xenophon, the independent senator from South Australia, with serious allegations that have rocked Scientology.
As criminal.
And hiding behind religious beliefs to make money.
It's drawn instant condemnation from the church.
Senator Xenophon has used parliamentary privilege to make some outrageous and completely wrong statements about Scientology.
Senator Xenophon is renowned for his stance against poker machines. Now he's used parliamentary privilege to protect these ordinary Australians from Scientology's army of lawyers.
These victims of Scientology claim it is an abusive, manipulative, violent and criminal organisation, and that criminality is condoned at the highest levels.
First of all, let me just check. All of you are out of Scientology.
Yeah, that's correct. Correct.
This is Paul Schofield, 53 years old, a powder coater who got out last year after 3 decades inside Scientology.
It is alleged that information about suspicious deaths and child abuse has been destroyed, and one follower has admitted that he was coerced by the organisation into perjuring himself during investigations into the deaths of his 2 daughters.
Are you saying that that did happen?
It happened.
Paul says his first daughter, Lauren, who was 14 months old, was being babysat at the organisation's building in Sydney when she was allowed to wander the stairs by herself and fell. She died in hospital 2 days later. Paul says he felt pressured by Scientology executives not to request a coronial inquiry, pressure he ultimately gave into.
You've been out of the church for just over a year, I think. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's incredibly hard to live with. I've lost 2 daughters. Both times I've done my utmost to protect the church from any consequences of those deaths. For what? Seriously, for what? It's like, at the time, as these guys have already said, you look at something as the greatest good for the greatest number, and Scientology must be protected at all costs.
His second daughter, Kirsty, who was two and a half, died after ingesting potassium chloride, a substance used as part of a so-called purification program run by the organisation. Under the direction of Scientology executives, Paul says he perjured himself to the police and during the coronial inquest in order to protect the organisation.
I look at my past 30 years and I go, what sort of brain-dead zombie was I? Seriously, I can't justify my actions. I can't critically say what I did was correct. I cannot do that, and I have to live with that. But the best I can do is make sure that no one else falls into that trap.
Aaron Saxton is 36 years old, an IT contractor. Aaron is now based in Perth.
Aaron Saxton is one of the victims of Scientology who wrote to me. He was born into the organisation and rose to a position of influence in Sydney and the United States.
What do you think the average Australian, hearing about some of the claims you've made, would make of Scientology? What would they think of Scientology, hearing some of the things you were involved in, you witnessed?
I think that they would question whether or not those tactics, those sort of policies would actually be acceptable in a country that's a democracy, a first-class country.
Or a first-class outfit.
featuring some of the brightest stars in the world.
Let me ask you about a couple of specific things Senator Xenophon has mentioned.
He says while under control of Scientology, he was involved in coercing female followers to have abortions.
How do you feel about this now?
How do I feel about it? Try to take a look at yourself in a subjective or objective point of view, and you can never quite understand how you ever justified it in yourself to ever ask another human being. Especially when the motivation behind it had nothing to do with the mother, the father, or the potential existing child. It had everything to do with, oh, look, I just need somebody to be in this position in the church, and I can't tolerate the idea of having to train someone else up for another 5 years. And that's your motivation behind it.
Aaron says women who fell pregnant were taken to offices and bullied to have an abortion. If they refused, they faced demotion and hard labour. Aaron says the hope in the organisation was that if these pregnant women were given these punishments, they would give in and have an abortion or miscarry.
You say the word abortion, back then I heard the word, I've got a recruitment problem.
A recruitment problem. It's not so much about abortion, forcing someone to have an abortion. So, and how do you force them? What was the threat? What was the penalty if they didn't have the abortion? What were they facing?
The penalty was identical in every state, because the bottom line...
And what's the penalty?
You could be put through what they would call a confessional, which any other human being would call an interrogation.
Perhaps the most stunning evidence about forced abortions in Scientology comes from the founder of Scientology himself. This is L. Ron Hubbard, giving one of his Scientology lectures in 1952.
The auditors who have discovered this to date have asked me not to mention it, but theta clearing provides pregnancy termination at will. We mustn't mention this because, God help us all, there goes the moral code.